After the company went bankrupt, to avoid burdening me, my husband presented me with divorce papers. After leaving with nothing, I accidentally saw my husband traveling with his mistress and our son. Turns out I was the fool all along. Looking at the 200 million jackpot in my hands, I screamed with excitement. To hell with that cheating scumbag. Frank knelt before me, crying and saying, "Honey, the company has gone bankrupt. We owe billions." Afraid I wouldn't believe him, he shoved a stack of papers into my hands. I stared at them in a daze. On top was the court's bankruptcy certification document, with a strikingly bright red official seal. Flipping through, I saw the bankruptcy liquidation application, the company's final account statement, the balance sheet, loan agreements, a thick stack. My mind went completely blank. Frank continued, "Honey, to avoid dragging you down, let's get a divorce." After speaking, he handed me another divorce agreement. In the lower right corner was his signature. With trembling hands, I signed my own name. Frank hugged me and said, "Honey, this house will soon be auctioned off too. I've lost everything." Looking at the home we'd lived in for 10 years, my eyes stung as I fought back tears and asked, "What about our son?" Frank wiped away his tears and said, "We can endure hardship, but not our son. I'm using the last bit of money in our account to send him abroad for studies." I nodded, thinking Frank was really thoughtful. After the divorce papers came through, Frank was busy all day with company liquidation and our son's study abroad arrangements. Clutching the bank card, I looked at the lottery station across the street and decided to go all in. With my last 5,000 yuan, I staked everything on lottery tickets. Fortunately, my gamble paid off. I won 2 billion. I jumped for joy and couldn't wait to share this incredible news with Frank, but when I called him, his phone was turned off. Then I remembered, today was the day he was sending our son abroad for school. He must be on the plane right now. I wanted to use this unexpected windfall to pay off my husband's debts so our family of 3 could be together again. I thought of a senior from college I'd been close with, a top partner at one of China's leading accounting firms. As an expert in corporate bankruptcy liquidation, he'd be perfect for this. I want to consult with him to see if using this money to pay off debts is the best solution. He told me he's currently on vacation abroad. Given the urgency of the situation, I decided to fly overseas to meet him in person. As soon as I got off the plane, I headed straight for that famous resort hotel. While scanning the area for my senior wearing sunglasses, I unexpectedly spotted Frank. He was wearing board shorts, holding a camera, and taking pictures. Following his gaze, I saw a woman in a peach-colored bikini posing coquettishly for the camera while embracing a boy. That boy was none other than my son, Jake. My vision swam with dizziness, and I wondered if the glaring sun had deceived my eyes. I took out my phone to call Frank. In the distance, he held the camera under his arm, fished his phone from his trouser pocket, glanced at it with a frown, hung up, and stuffed it back. Just then, the dialing on my own phone stopped. I called again. This time, he answered. He walked to a quieter spot, cupping the receiver with his hand. "What is it?" His tone was laced with impatience. "Oh, nothing much. Just wanted to ask if you've arrived abroad yet? Is our son's school all settled?" "Everything's arranged. We're resting now." Silence. After 3 seconds, Frank spoke up, "If there's nothing else, I'll hang up first." "All right. When you return, I have a surprise to tell you about." Frank responded with a distracted before hanging up the phone. I stared at the distant, happy family of 3, my hands clenched into fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms without me feeling any pain. A cold smile slowly crept across my lips. I took out my phone and snapped a few satisfactory photos, along with some videos. Upon meeting my senior, my first words were, "Senior, I recall one of the companies you previously served faked bankruptcy and was eventually exposed, right?" A trace of confusion appeared on the senior's handsome face. Before he could speak, I continued, "I have some documents here. Could you please take a look at them for me? It's paid work, name your price." After just a glance, the senior spotted the issue. A building materials company with only 30 employees, how could the losses be this severe? This data doesn't seem right. The senior scrutinized the documents further and added, this sterling company has the most frequent business dealings with Frank Company. I just looked it up on Kachacha, this company was established just 6 months ago. The senior glanced at me, and I instantly understood his implication. You mean it's a shell company? The senior raised an eyebrow with a smile and nodded. Julia, what happened between you and Frank? He asked with concern. Frank and I were college classmates, from school uniforms to wedding dresses, we were the campus couple everyone envied. Yet in just over a decade, everything changed. Not only did he cheat, but he also schemed to leave me with nothing after divorce. Even the son I raised for over a decade turned out to be an ungrateful wretch, helping his father deceive me. It chilled me to the bone. I took a deep breath and forced a casual tone, Senior, I'm about to fight a tough battle. Do you know any reliable lawyers? Name your price. Where'd you strike it rich? Talking so big. I waggled a finger in front of my senior's face. Though thoroughly confused, my senior still took out his phone to help me contact someone. That same day, I flew back home to meet with a lawyer and discuss countermeasures. At 2 a.m., tossing and turning, I stared blankly at the photos taken by the seaside. Every person who betrays their family deserves to die. Hatred burned in my heart as I recalled that woman's delicate features and youthful body. I opened the social media app, intending to use reverse image search to find that woman's social media account. Young people these days have one distinct characteristic, they love to show off, whether it's their lifestyle, their relationships, or just about anything. As expected, I found Jessica's account. An hour ago, she had posted an update. In the 9-grid photo collage, there she was, unmistakably posing in a swimsuit by the beach in various positions. Although 2 of the group photos had people blurred out, I still recognized them as Frank and Jake. I saved the photo to my phone. As I kept scrolling, this woman didn't disappoint, Frank had indeed been involved with her since a year ago. I methodically saved all this evidence. A plan for revenge was brewing in my heart. By the time Frank returned with our son and his mistress, I had already moved into the apartment directly above his. Standing at their doorstep, I held a bag of moldy fruit. The trio had been laughing and chatting, but they froze the moment they saw me. Mom, how are you here? I looked at my son with a forced smile and retorted, I was about to ask you the same thing, what are you doing here? My son, still young after all, turned to look at his dear father for help. Frank wore a sorrowful expression, his tone dripping with sincerity. Julia, I'm sorry. I lied to you. The truth is, I never enrolled Jake in a school abroad. I've been broke for a while now, and I didn't want to worry you, so I resorted to this. I let out a mocking laugh, eyeing the woman in the crop top and miniskirt beside him. And who might this be? Oh, this is the buyer I told you about. Yes, we're selling the house to her. I brought her here today to transfer the property. I burst into laughter. Frank, oh Frank. Is this why you tricked me into divorcing you? Because of this woman? You went through so much trouble just to divorce me. As soon as I said this, Frank's expression changed, and he still tried to make excuses. I directly threw the photos in front of them and then played the video. A sweet, coquettish voice came from the video, affectionately calling out hubby. The woman didn't pretend anymore, arrogantly walking up to me, lifting her chin, Julia, you're out. Your husband and this luxury apartment are all mine now. Smack. I directly slapped her across the face, leaving a fine red mark on her pale skin instantly. Ah, the woman screamed, lunging at me, how dare you hit me? But before she could get close to me, Frank pulled her back. Julia, with that slap, we're even. Now leave. Oh, by the way, these are for you. I handed over the bag of fruits and continued, our place is going to be renovated soon, so it might get noisy. Since we're neighbors, let's all get along peacefully. They exchanged bewildered glances, completely confused by my words. I turned and walked toward the elevator. Pausing beside Jake, I asked, "I'm willing to give you one chance. Are you coming or not?" He shrank back with a timid step and shook his head slightly. Great. At 8 a.m. the next morning, the renovation company I had booked arrived. I instructed the workers to fire up the power drills immediately. Walls were being smashed and holes drilled everywhere. The workers were highly motivated, operating 3 power drills simultaneously to speed up the progress. Feeling the ceiling vibrate from the commotion, I cheerfully stepped out. I was at a spa getting treatments when Frank's call came through. In the quiet clubhouse, Frank yelled loudly, "Julia, so it's really you. What the hell are you doing?" "Frank, I'm warning you. If you keep shouting like this, I'll sue you for harassment. Can you please ask the construction workers to leave first? It's so noisy early in the morning that none of us can sleep." "No. Even if you hate me, you shouldn't be so unethical, should you?" "Frank, let me remind you again, my renovation is completely legal. If you have any issues, you can take it up with the property management or the police." Frank was stunned and suddenly blurted out, "Did you really buy that apartment?" "What if I did? Where did you get the money?" "None of your business." I hung up the phone, closed my eyes, and continued enjoying the stretch of my body. After a while, my phone rang again. An unfamiliar voice said, "Julia, this is the police. Someone has reported you for disturbing the peace. Please come back." When I arrived home, a crowd had gathered at the door, with 2 uniformed police officers in the middle. When they saw me return, the crowd around me began to accuse me, "So early in the morning, what a racket. It's loud enough to give me a heart attack." "Exactly. It's the weekend, and she's ruined our good mood. We're all working folks who rarely get to sleep in on weekends. And here you are, waking us up with a drill like an alarm clock." In the crowd, Frank and his lover stood with their arms crossed, watching me smugly. "Officer, my renovation is completely legal and above board. It's been filed with the housing authority, and we've notified the property management as well." "Then you should be careful too, she is pregnant." "I'm really sorry for disturbing any neighbors, I'll personally apologize to them." The police officer pointed at Frank and his mistress. The moment I saw them, tears welled up in my eyes. "Officer, if it's them, then I can't apologize." Hearing my words, the crowd took another look at Frank and the woman, realizing there was history between us. People craned their necks to get a better view. "You know them?" "More than just know. The man is my ex-husband, and the woman is his mistress. We divorced just a month ago, and he couldn't wait to bring this woman home and kick me out." I spoke with tears in my voice, and since most of the onlookers were women, they all started pointing fingers at the 2 of them. In an instant, I had seized the moral high ground. Hearing the crowd criticizing her, the woman jumped out and pointed at me, shouting, "Who can you blame if you can't keep your own husband? Just look at yourself, you're old and faded, and so controlling. What man could stand being interrogated by you every day like he's a criminal?" I lowered my head and sobbed, my shoulders shaking violently. As her finger nearly jabbed into my nose, I turned and hid behind the police officer. The officer couldn't take it anymore and intervened to restore order. All right, your family matters shouldn't waste public resources. Go home and sort it out yourselves. And you, ma'am, you're in the wrong here, so just calm down." I smirked as I watched her face turn as ugly as if she'd eaten shit. The next day, the renovation continued. Early in the morning, Frank took his mistress and their son to stay at a hotel. I watched them drag their suitcases and drive away, then took out my phone to call my lawyer. "How's that matter coming along?" Upon hearing the precise reply, I smiled happily. "Frank, we'll be seeing each other very soon." 2 days later, Frank called me in a furious rage. "Julia, how dare you sue me? Remember to be on time. I don't like people being late, you know that." "Julia, you bitch," Frank said through gritted teeth. I hung up the phone directly. This was just the beginning. A week later, Frank came to court as scheduled. The moment he saw me, he glared at me viciously. The woman beside him, his mistress named Jessica, spat in my direction. "Your Honor, my husband Frank, during our marriage, had an affair with Jessica, transferred a total of 200,000 yuan to her, and spent another 500,000 yuan purchasing luxury handbags, jewelry, clothing, and..." Before I could finish, Jessica couldn't wait to defend herself. "Your Honor, this woman is lying. Frank and I are lawfully married." The judge gave Jessica a displeased glance and said, "Let the plaintiff finish speaking first. You'll have your turn to speak later." Jessica glared at me resentfully and shut her mouth. "For the past 10 years, I sacrificed my career as a homemaker for this family, yet never received the recognition I deserved. Frank tricked me into signing divorce papers by claiming his company went bankrupt, leaving me with nothing. I demand compensation from the defendant for emotional damages and financial reimbursement for my years as a homemaker. Additionally, I demand the defendant Jessica return the marital assets totaling 898,000 yuan. Only then did the judge glance at Jessica and ask, "Defendant, do you have anything to say?" "Yes. Yes." Jessica said eagerly with a smug expression, "That money was all payment from Frank for procurement goods. It's noted in the remarks." I looked at her and shook my head, then retorted, "Just because you say so doesn't make it true. Where's the procurement contract? Where are the invoices? Why was the payment made to you privately instead of through the company account?" Jessica was left speechless by my questions and turned to Frank for help. Under the intense gaze of everyone, Frank slowly uttered 2 words, "Tax evasion." Ha ha ha, I laughed wildly inside. This person really doesn't realize he's digging his own grave. The judge gave him an exasperated look and continued, "Defendant, if you have no evidence to prove otherwise, then it is considered an unconditional gift. During the marriage, any transferred funds can be reclaimed by the other spouse." Jessica was dumbfounded. I spent it all," she said tearfully. "That's your problem. Now, I am your creditor. You have 3 days to repay the full amount." The lawsuit was a foregone conclusion. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. Jessica followed me, looking unconvinced as she said, "Julia, don't get cocky. It's just over 800 grand, even if you asked for 1 million, I wouldn't care, humph. You probably have no idea." As if realizing she'd said too much, she abruptly stopped talking and smirked at me, her eyes dripping with disdain. Frank stepped forward, pulling her away, clearly afraid I might uncover some secret. "Hey, stop right there." I marched up to them and spat fiercely at Jessica. Jinx. While Jessica was hopping mad, I pulled open the car door beside me and slipped inside. After my house was renovated, Frank downstairs also hired a decoration company. At 8 a.m. sharp, I was jolted awake from my dreams by the sound of an electric drill. Going downstairs, I saw Frank arm in arm with Jessica, looking at me with a smug expression. "Honey, let's redesign our house again. The previous decoration was hideous. Who on earth has such terrible taste?" Jessica's mouth was talking to Frank, but her eyes were on me. I might as well have treated it like she farted. "Renovations cost a lot, don't they? Didn't your company just go bankrupt?" I asked with concern. Frank's expression darkened instantly, turning fierce. "None of your business." I chuckled and replied, "Guess it really isn't my business." I took 2 photos of the house being renovated, then took the elevator downstairs. I found a quiet spot and started making phone calls one by one according to the list. It took me a full 2 hours until my phone ran out of battery before I finished all 16 calls. Early the next morning, I finally stopped hearing that brain-drilling noise. Instead, it was replaced by intense arguing voices. When I went downstairs, the entrance was packed with layers upon layers of people inside and out. Faintly, I heard someone inside shouting, "Frank, you have money to renovate the house but can't pay our wages? Let's all get together, this unscrupulous boss is withholding our hard-earned money. We'll fight them if we have to." Soon after, the sound of things being smashed and women's screams could be heard. I crossed my arms and watched the commotion with everyone else. After a while, someone shouted, "The police are here." Just then, 2 uniformed officers stepped out of the elevator. Moments later, the police escorted Frank out. The moment I saw Frank, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. He was wearing pajamas and oversized shorts, with a large red bump swelling on his forehead, looking utterly disheveled. Hearing the laughter, he turned around and saw it was me. "You again, Julia, you stupid woman," he snarled viciously. The 2 police officers turned to look at me together, and I hastily said, "I'm a law-abiding citizen." I recognized them. They were the same officers who had come to handle Frank's noise complaint last time. Behind Frank followed dozens of men and women with aggressive expressions, all wearing identical white t-shirts emblazoned with bold red characters in the center, "Frank, pay us back." I recognized the man leading the group. His name was Daniel, a longtime employee of Frank's company who had been with us since the early days of the startup. That's right, it was us. In the early days of Frank's startup, I invested all my savings to support him, and he gave me 20% of the shares. However, later when the company became stable, he returned my initial investment and had me transfer my shares to him, making him the largest shareholder of the company. And I, naturally, became a housewife. I once read a saying online that couples can endure hardship together, but not share prosperity. How true that turned out to be. Frank was sued for unpaid wages. It seems he used that trick to deceive many people, including me. 24 hours later, Frank returned looking utterly dejected. Instead of going home, he came straight to my place and started banging on the door. "That's a top-tier security door I installed. If he wants to smash it, let him be my guest." Meanwhile, I was already miles away at a 5-star hotel. No way was I waiting around at home for him. Watching Frank lose his mind on the surveillance feed while savoring a gourmet meal that cost $1,000 per head, pure bliss, I tell you. Only when he'd made enough of a scene did I finally call property management to report someone maliciously damaging my private property, asking them to handle it. 3 minutes later, Frank was politely escorted out by the property management. Shortly after, my phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, I immediately turned off my phone. I couldn't let that revolting person ruin my meal. After finishing dinner, I turned my phone back on and found a number in my contacts to dial. "Hello, Richard, how are you? Do you remember me?" "Yes, it's me." "You have an excellent memory. Actually, there's something I'd like to tell you." "Oh, you already know?" "Ah, that's what he said?" "I have something here that my accountant friend has looked over. I think you might need it." "Alright, I'll send it to you now." I stared at the set of numbers in the photo, deliberately zooming in for a closer look before sending them to Richard. After doing all this, I signed up for a tour group and went abroad for a week's vacation. When I returned home, I unexpectedly saw my long-absent son. He had noticeably lost weight and was looking at me timidly. "Mom. Don't call me that. I can't bear it. Mom, Dad sold the house. I'm homeless now. Can I come back to you?" my son pleaded. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly to myself. My son had never been this cautious around me before. He always said I was too overbearing, that I controlled him too strictly and left him no freedom. With me, he'd only ever shown cold defiance, never this careful timidity. I remained silent. He continued, "Mom, no matter what happened between you and Dad, I'm still your flesh and blood." "Exactly. Now I regret ever giving birth to you." Jake's face turned grim, his voice choked with emotion. "Mom, are you cutting ties with me?" "I wish I could, but the law won't allow it." "Mom. Jessica is your real mother. She doesn't control you or force you to do anything. You two have more in common. Go find her." My son cried, and my heart ached with a sharp pain. Frank sold the house to cover the employees' unpaid wages and compensation. But the ordeal was far from over. Richard acted faster than I had anticipated. He was one of Frank's suppliers, with over a decade of cooperation between them. I had leaked the flaws in Frank's bankruptcy application to him, and being a seasoned player, he immediately spotted the loopholes. He told me that Frank still owed him hundreds of thousands, which had been delayed under the pretense of bankruptcy. He asked me if I had a list of other suppliers. I generously sent it to him. Then, they jointly sued Frank as creditors, accusing the company of fraudulent bankruptcy. They wanted Frank to cough up every penny he had taken. I couldn't wait to see Frank lose the case and go berserk in court. On the day of the trial, I showed up wearing a full face of flawless makeup, dressed in designer professional attire, and strutting in high heels. Since I no longer had to stay home taking care of my son and serving my husband, I found myself with much more free time. I started getting regular spa treatments, slept my beauty sleep, and my skin became noticeably smoother and fairer. On top of that, I enrolled in a body management course and lost 10 pounds in just 1 month. The current me could truly be described as having undergone a complete transformation. Frank's gaze never left me from the moment I walked in, until Jessica gave him a sharp pinch. "We are suing Frank for fraudulent bankruptcy, forging official seals, fabricating debts, and concealing assets, all of which have severely harmed the interests of creditors and others. We request the judge to investigate thoroughly." Before Frank could respond, Jessica waved a piece of paper excitedly and exclaimed, "Your Honor, we're truly bankrupt." The judge at the bench banged the gavel loudly, but Jessica pretended not to hear, shouting hysterically in the solemn and quiet courtroom. Finally, the judge sternly warned her that she would be expelled from the court if she continued making noise, which finally made her behave. I looked at her like she was an idiot. This woman had beauty but no brains. At that moment, Frank's lawyer spoke up unhurriedly, "Your Honor, here is the bankruptcy petition from my client's company." The lawyer respectfully handed over the documents, and the judge lowered his head to review them. "Plaintiff, what evidence do you have to support your claims?" Upon hearing this, Richard's lawyer immediately stood up. "Your Honor, these are the financial statements provided by the defendant's company to the bank. There are multiple questionable points, which we have compiled for your review." After examining them, the judge nodded and asked, "Defendant, do you have any explanations?" Frank then presented a thick stack of invoices. Soon, the judge asked a question, "Were all these invoices paid to Sterling Company?" Frank replied, "Yes." The moment I heard that name, alarm bells went off in my mind, and I leaned over to whisper a few words to my lawyer. This company was established just 6 months ago, whereas the defendant's company has been operating for 15 years. A company that's only been around for half a year engaging in substantial business dealings with a 15-year-old enterprise. Your Honor, could the defendant please explain the reasoning behind this? The lawyer spoke deliberately, and I could see Frank's face turn pale. Before Frank could speak, Jessica beside him couldn't sit still any longer and blurted out, "We like it, none of your business." I rolled my eyes. The next second, Frank covered her mouth and glared at her. The judge gave Jessica a second warning. Jessica pouted, looking utterly wronged. Then, our side presented new evidence. 6 months ago, Frank set up a private account overseas, and every 2 weeks, 5-digit sums were transferred to this account. If Frank's business was operating at a loss, where did this money come from? The judge flipped through the documents and asked, "Defendant, what do you have to say about this?" Frank had a sudden inspiration and replied, "This is money saved for my son's overseas education." If it was funds intended for a child's education, why were they processed through the company account, with falsified invoices, and recorded in the corporate balance sheet? How do you explain that? Frank was rendered speechless by the series of questions. He anxiously glanced at the lawyer beside him, who was drenched in sweat and utterly at a loss. Our side took one look at Frank and dropped the final bombshell. 1 month ago, the defendant sold company assets at a low price to Sterling Corporation, whose legal representative is named Mike. Your Honor, our investigation has confirmed that Mike has an unusual relationship with the defendant's current wife. After speaking, the lawyer handed over a stack of photocopied photos and documents. Frank glanced at Jessica in disbelief and questioned, "Isn't he your cousin?" As soon as these words were spoken, even the judge was stunned. This lawsuit was won without a doubt, and the judge immediately declared. The defendant, Frank, is guilty of fraudulent bankruptcy, severely harming the interests of creditors. He is sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison, with a 1-year probation, and fined 200,000 yuan. Outside the courtroom, Richard warmly shook my hand. Frank rushed over and thumped to his knees right in front of Richard. "Richard, can you give me another chance?" Richard gave him a disdainful look, snorted coldly, and turned away. Frank turned to me and started cursing. "Julia, you bitch, I hope you die a horrible death, you poisonous woman. Isn't my money going to be your son's anyway? Are you happy to see me go to jail?" I curled my lips into a smirk and said, "Yes, watching you go to prison makes me so happy. I'm practically dying of joy." All of Frank's account funds were frozen. Not a single cent of the money he tried to transfer can be retrieved now. Frank's face turned ashen. As he turned his head, he suddenly realized Jessica had disappeared at some point. "Have you seen Jessica?" he asked the lawyer. The lawyer shook his head. Then Frank took out his phone and made a call. He tried several times, but it was probably all switched off. He became increasingly irritable, kicking the ground hard with his foot. "Hey, let me give you a hint." I opened my phone and showed him a video. His face twisted with rage as he started cursing Jessica loudly, then quickly ran toward the car and drove off at an astonishing speed. I looked at the video. It was a clip of Jessica cheating with a man. As for that man, Frank certainly recognized him. It was the so-called cousin Mike she had mentioned. I knew Frank was done for. A surge of pleasure rose within me. Today was truly a day to feast. I made plans to meet my senior and tell him about the trial results. He sighed. Frank is a very capable man, otherwise he wouldn't have gotten this far starting from scratch. But men, once they get rich, they turn bad, their hearts become tainted. While investigating Sterling Company, I noticed something off about Mike. How could an uneducated punk become a legal representative? Who gave him the courage? Naturally, it was Jessica. He and Jessica grew up together since childhood. The two of them hooked the big fish Frank and surely swindled him out of everything he had. When Frank proposed transferring company assets under the guise of bankruptcy and needed to set up another company, Jessica immediately thought of Mike. Having navigated society for years, Mike was slick enough to leave Frank completely unaware of the deception. At first, I noticed something fishy between them through Jessica's social media posts. Indeed, a woman's intuition about affairs of the heart is uncannily accurate. How will Frank, who has been betrayed, react with furious humiliation? How will he take revenge on Jessica? I'm watching with bated interest. Before long, I received a call from the police. It turned out that Frank had jumped from a building. He didn't die and was being treated at the hospital. Since he had no other close connections in the city, they could only call me his ex-wife. "Is this Julia? Do you know Frank?" I nodded and replied, "He's my ex-husband." "Do you know Jessica and Mike?" "I know Jessica, she's my ex-husband's current wife." "Well, there's a situation we need to discuss with you. Could you please come to the hospital?" "Okay." When I arrived at the hospital, I found out that the person who called me was actually a police officer. We received a report of a physical altercation. When we arrived, Frank and Mike had just jumped from the building together, and Jessica was lying nearby, unconscious. Jessica has regained consciousness. The doctors performed surgery on her, and she has just given her statement. "What happened to her? What's going on?" I asked. "She had a miscarriage. After waking up, she said it was caused by Frank assaulting her." "What about Frank?" "Frank is in the ICU now. The doctors say he'll most likely be paralyzed from the neck down." "Officer, what would you like to know?" "I'll tell you everything." The police officer then asked me many questions, whether I understood the relationships between Frank, Jessica, and Mike, and why they had gotten into an argument. After completing the police report, it was already 2 a.m. when I left the hospital. The hospital was still brightly lit. In the distance, an ambulance came wailing in, and an ER doctor rushed past me, making me hastily step aside. Watching this scene, my mood suddenly turned somber. In a daze, I returned home, washed up hastily, and collapsed into bed. The next day, I was awakened by the doorbell. The property manager stood at the door, with Jake beside him. Seeing me, he burst into tears with a wail. "Mom, Dad. Come in." I opened the door to let him in. Carrying a backpack, he entered and immediately forgot his tears, his wide eyes darting around curiously. "I already know about your father. He brought this on himself." To my surprise, my son nodded in agreement. "Mom, I finally understand now, everything you did before was for my own good. You're the best, Mom. It's too late to understand now." From Jake's words, I learned that Mike had died. That day, after Frank stormed off in anger, he went straight to Sterling Company. The place was already deserted. After Frank got entangled in lawsuits, Mike had begun making preparations to abscond with the funds. With Jessica's cooperation, the two of them had made thorough preparations. The day the lawsuit was lost, Jessica excused herself to go to the restroom and never returned. She had gone to meet up with Mike. The two hid in an abandoned construction site, but unexpectedly, Frank found them. After all, they were holding Frank's entire life savings. At the sight of Jessica, fury robbed Frank of his senses. He grabbed her and began beating her mercilessly, kicking and punching until she miscarried. Seeing blood stream down her legs, Jessica let out a heart-wrenching scream before collapsing into unconsciousness. Hearing the noise, Mike came out, saw Jessica's tragic state, and got into a fight with Frank. In the end, both men fell from the building. Mike died on the spot. Frank was lucky. When he fell, he happened to land on a ledge, which cushioned his fall and saved his life, but he was left with severe paralysis from the neck down. A week later, I went to the hospital to see Frank. In just 2 short months, he seemed to have aged over a decade, his eyes dull and vacant. Seeing me, he gritted his teeth, his furious expression as if he wanted to devour me. Looking at Frank lying in bed, only able to move his head, a trace of pity arose in my heart. "Julia, how dare you show your face here? If it weren't for you, would I have ended up like this today?" I laughed. "I've never seen someone as shameless as you. Clearly, you're the one who did wrong, yet you push all the blame onto others." Frank could only glare at me in frustration. I laughed, deciding to strike another blow. "You know what? Mike is dead." Seeing his shocked expression, I added another line, "Jessica is suing you." This sent Frank into a furious rage. The veins at the corners of his eyes bulged, and his eyes turned bloodshot. Clearly, that name had stirred up painful memories. "That bitch. What right does she have?" "The right that you beat her until she miscarried and caused Mike's death." He let out a guttural growl, his face twisted with rage as he snarled, "I should have killed her too, that damned pair of adulterers. Considering our past as husband and wife, I'll hire you a good lawyer." With that, I turned and walked out the door. Behind me, Frank's furious curses echoed through the room. Jessica's efforts came to nothing in the end. She took Frank to court, where he was ultimately sentenced to 11 years in prison for violent assault and intentional homicide resulting in death. Upon hearing the verdict, Frank became visibly agitated, expressing his refusal to accept the judgment and vowing to appeal. He glared at the judge with hatred and even spat in their direction. Well, that earned him an additional charge for disrupting court order. A doctor nearby stepped forward and administered a sedative, finally calming him down. Due to Frank's health condition, he was deemed unsuitable for imprisonment and was granted temporary external execution of his sentence. He returned to the hospital, confined to his ward, a situation hardly different from being in jail. Now his only remaining family is Jake, his 16-year-old son who must balance school with caring for his paralyzed father. I don't feel the slightest bit sorry for him, this was his own choice. When I saw Frank again, I arrived at his hospital room accompanied by a lawyer, carrying the company acquisition contract. When Frank saw me, he didn't even have the strength to glare at me. After listening to the lawyer's statement, he said with complete despair, "Are you satisfied now?" I nodded. "Fairly. Frank's company also has my share. The long-term clients we worked with initially have expressed their willingness to continue collaborating. After being a housewife for 10 years, it's now time for my rebirth and transformation. From now on, I am no longer the housewife whose life revolved solely around her husband and son. I have my own name, Julia. I have my own company. I am my own boss. I helped Frank pay off all the debts owed to creditors and gained control of the company. From now on, it no longer belongs to Frank, it is mine, Julia's." Just as I was about to leave, Frank suddenly shouted, "Julia, where did you get so much money? You're so cunning, using my money to buy my company." I smiled faintly and took out the lottery ticket that had won me the grand prize, waving it before Frank's eyes. "Frank, don't assume everyone is as despicable as you. You know what? While you were traveling abroad with Jessica, I was back home desperately trying to find ways to pay off your debts. I spent my last 5,000 yuan on lottery tickets, and by heaven's mercy, I actually hit the jackpot. My first thought was to share this good news with you, only to discover your betrayal. Do you have any idea how that felt?" I poured out my words in one breath, and when I looked at Frank, his face had turned pale with disbelief. "You know exactly how it feels to be betrayed by someone closest to you, now you've tasted it yourself." I looked at him smugly, feeling an immense sense of satisfaction in my chest. "I should thank you for letting me see your true colors sooner rather than later." Frank on the hospital bed glared at me sideways. "Haha, I just love the way you can't stand me but can't do anything about it." Not long after, I heard that Jake dropped out of school. Without my supervision and given his natural aversion to studying, his grades plummeted until he simply quit. While his peers were still studying hard, he was already out there working odd jobs everywhere. I found him and said I was willing to continue paying for his tuition and living expenses. He refused. He began a life of working part-time while taking care of Frank. I chose to respect his decision. My daily life became busy yet fulfilling as I poured all my time and energy into work. Several months later, the company gradually stabilized, and I began intentionally grooming a successor. From then on, the world was my oyster, and I could soar freely.